Welcome to A Mile Deep with me, Coach Benjamin Owen. This podcast is all about going a mile deep into the areas that make you a great leader in your life, in your work, in your business. It is vital that we go a mile deep so that we can create success that goes a mile high and a mile wide. So if you think about this, there are many things that can often trouble a leader. And this podcast is primarily based on the 6 fears I believe that leaders come up against when they are either pushed into a position of leadership or they are ascending their career and they end up in a place of leadership. Or it could be that there are points that I make on today's podcast which you might be experiencing. You're leading a team, you're leading an organization, yet there is contraction or you're being held back in your success because of one of these fears that you have. And I've only got 6 down today, but I'm going to talk way through them, share why they exist, and possible solutions for you to overcome them as well. And honestly, this is the stuff that I'll be covering in the Mile Deep Mastermind. The reason I created the Mile Deep Mastermind was because so many leaders I work with have so many struggles around different areas of leadership, whether it's vision and planning and what they want to create and leading themselves and their team, whether it's things like discipline, getting things done that need to be done, whether it's thinking differently and transforming the way that we think and interact with our problems, or finally the one that I talked more about recently, but it's something I'm really, really passionate about, is self-love. Like actually really loving yourself to the point where you are unconditional, you're so powerful with your leadership, you've got so much love to give that when you create from this space, you're the most powerful leader in the room. So they're the areas I like to cover when I work with leaders. And what I've noticed is these 6 fears that keep coming up time and time again with the coaching clients I have, the conversations I have, and I want to address them because I think it's going to be really helpful for you. So here's the first one. The first fear that I think a lot of leaders have is the fear of being found out. And the way this might manifest for you is that it's not that you fear like overtly, you don't say that I fear being found out. The way this might show up for you is that you feel that one day someone's going to tap you on the back and say, hang on a second, where are your credentials? Where are the things that you've got you in this position? Are you qualified to do this? And I think this happens quite a lot in like speaking arrangements, when you put yourself out there, when you show up on social media, when you put yourself in a position where you're saying, hey, I'm the leader, I'm driving this forward. And I think that we live in a culture, especially, in the UK culture, where if someone puts their head above the parapet and saying, right, this is how it's done, this is how I want to do it, there are so many people that have experienced and witnessed people being torn down. So the fear is real, right? So the fear of being found out is real. There's so many trolls and people to pull you down out there. We see real examples of this every single day, especially if you spend any time on social media. So what we do is we dim our light when we experience this fear. We hold ourselves in a position where we don't want to show up. We don't want to show our true potential in case someone is going to find us out and tell us that we're not qualified. And then what this drives, I think, this was like shame-based fear for me. It was a shame-based fear that I didn't know enough. So what I did is I told myself, I'm going to become so damn qualified. I'm going to do so many courses. I'm going to qualify myself to the teeth in order to make sure that I know enough to be able to put myself in a position of leadership. And albeit that there's so many positives to that, like there is so many positives to that. I spoke to Craig White, actually, a great friend of mine. He was the coach of the British and Irish Lions, the strength conditioning coach for British and Irish Lions. And actually, when I shared this in a men's group, he said, this is what, we talked openly about this. It's one of the struggles we both shared, is like we both have this incessant need to qualify and develop ourselves, but it was coming from this imposter syndrome of who are you to lead? Who are you to not, do this? And the reason this is such a big pervasive fear for so many people is that it's almost like there's never-ending goalposts. They're never going to reach the goalposts. We're never going to be qualified enough. We're never going to know enough. We're never going to be smart enough. So it becomes quite an exhausting process. And we have this imposter syndrome. And and what it is I don't think it's actually just imposter syndrome. It's a perfectionist mindset. I'm going to become so good at what I do that you're not going to be able to judge me. It's actually a fear of judgment. I think for me it was anyways. Like, I'm going to become so qualified. I'm going to know everything. I'm going to know enough so that I will not get judged. And here's the thing to fix this: is actually it's actually being humble enough that when someone does challenge you, that you have the character to deal with it. You have the character to say, do you know what? Yeah, actually, I like that perspective. It's a little bit different to mine. So many people fear being wrong. And maybe the fear of being found out is very, very linked to the fear of being wrong. Like, oh, I got something wrong. Does me getting one thing wrong mean that I'm a terrible leader? Does me getting one thing wrong or not being right mean that I've got a catalogue of things wrong? And I think that's what so many people fear. So here's my fix for this. Here's like how I would go about fixing this with the leader and have done in the past. So I've worked with so many people who've come into my space of coaching talking about this fear of being found out, fear about being an imposter. And the first thing I do is actually get them to build a catalogue of undeniable truth. And the way actually, to be found out, and if you found out and you are not very good, you're in trouble. There's actually genuinely a consequence of that. If you actually are not very good at what you do, my first mentor told me this kind of quite crude analogy is you only buy shit in a can once, and it makes me laugh. But if you're great, people return, people carry on paying, people carry on learning, people stay with you, people stay in your leadership. You've got to be good. But the fix for this, first and foremost, is be good. Be really, really good at what you do. Master your craft and continually find ways to master your craft. And it's not an either or. It's and actually repurpose this imposter syndrome conversation you've got going on as a driver. It's just a driver to keep in the humble beginner mindset that you know enough and there's more to learn. And I think that's what I came to in the end, is like, I know a lot and I've got more to learn. And actually it was a really important switch in my mid-20s, because in my juvenile early parts of especially my strength and conditioning career and my PT career, I thought I knew the 99% and I was looking for the 1. And albeit what I was thinking was that I know so much, I'm only looking for 1%, and then I've completed it, mate. Whereas actually there's a big shift, and then it was like, I know the 1% and I'm looking for the 99, and it gave me such a more expansive way to view the world. So being found out is a process of someone knocking you on the shoulder saying you're not qualified enough. And the antidote to that is, first of all, starting from the position of, if you've decided to lead and you are capable of showing up in your most powerful way, you are already in a position to lead. There is so much need for people to be able to say, I can lead, I can do this, I can move forward. But the qualification sometimes can get in the way. I know so many people will say, I will lead when, and they'll say that I've got to have the PhD, I've got to have the masters, I've got to have the qualifications. You absolutely need to be qualified, but you absolutely need to be taking action as well. I'm going to share something actually quite interesting. I didn't have a personal training qualification for probably the first 3 years of when I was practicing as a personal trainer. I started as a 15-year-old on the beach with my friends, and I said, come down to the session, pay me £1, and I'll do some circuit training with you. And I did that for like a year. And then I was like, do you know what? I actually can make some money from this. I can be good at this. And I'd probably had like 2, maybe 3 years of experience before I even got a qualification. And I think that so many people, especially when it comes to coaching, when it comes to leadership, they think that they have to have the shiny brass badges before they can put themselves in that position. So sometimes it's kind of the be to do, but in this sense, it's do to be. Go and do the action, and you'll quickly become the person that you're capable of being. The second one, the second fear I've got here is the fear of failure, right? And so I don't think it's the fear of failure per se. Failure isn't really failure; it's ego failure. But I think it's the risks that we fear the most, and it's essentially like the experience of what happens when we take a risk and it doesn't pay off. And what we do to mitigate this is we play a much smaller game. And I think that growth, like personal growth, growth as a leader, growth as a person, is a series of micro risks, a series of courageous actions day in, day out, day in, day out. And here's the problem, is that when you risk things, like when you stop taking short-term risks, you often have much bigger long-term risks. And what I mean by this, if you're a leader that, for example, you've got a one-person business at the moment, or you've got like a small team, playing it safe in the short term is at the cost of the long term. And what I think happens is that when we risk playing it safe in the short term, we actually know that we're playing a smaller game, and we don't get the payoff of the risks. Now, what I mean by this is every time I take a risk where I put myself out there, I ask someone who's out of my stratosphere, right, if I can interview them or I can connect with them or anything like that, the payoff is courage. The payoff is confidence. The payoff is sometimes financial. It can be status, right? But when we are fearing failure, we almost have like a dimming switch on the amount of risk that we'll take, and it's such a dangerous place to be. And the best thing I ever learned around failure was actually the ability to reframe failure. And I'm going to go through it quickly because I think this is really helpful for you, is that we all have the ability to fail. That's like level 1 failure is the ability to fail. We all have it. We just need to choose to move forward. We all have the ability to fail, level 1. Level 2 is the willingness to fail. It's the willingness to go out there and take shots, and some of them come off, some of them don't. And it's the willingness to keep going in the face of them, some of them working out and some of them not. Here's the problem, I think, is that some people take a risk, it doesn't pay off, and they just revert back to the ability to fail. Yeah, I could do that, I should do that, or if I was to do that, I would. And then what happens is they go out into the arena, they take some shots, they have this willingness to fail, they don't get the feedback that they want, and then they fear what would happen to their confidence if they kept on getting these knockbacks after knockbacks after knockbacks. And I love the way that Phil Stutz put this: you can't confuse a knockback with a knockout. You've just got to collect the knockbacks in this phase. The willingness to fail, the willingness to get a knockback and get back up and keep going and keep going. That's one of my amazing skills. I'm very, very good at this, very resilient. I'm very anti-fragile. And anti-fragile means, in a statement, a wind extinguishes a candle, yet fuels a fire. And what that means is that some people, like a little candle, will have a knockback and they'll get put out. Whereas someone who collects knockbacks, it actually fuels them to move forward. They get stronger with every knockback and every time they get back up. And that's how I feel that I've created my psyche, my sort of motivation, is that every time I get a knockback, say for example, a client cancels a call or a potential client cancels a call, I've got a if this then that in my head. So say for example, I book a conversation with someone, they don't show for any which reason, could be circumstantial, could be they're just chosen not to come onto a call, is what I do is I go and message other people who I could go and serve straight away. It's like a default, right? Okay, well, this person hasn't been served today. I'm going to go and message 5 to 10 people that I could possibly serve. And it's a really powerful way for me to get back into service. Whereas some people, I've worked with clients like this, they have something that, like, for example, they book a client call, the client doesn't show up, and then they feel so sorry for themselves. They feel like nothing's working, and then they go and slack off, go and watch Netflix. And that's exactly what your part X, your self-sabotaging part of you, wants to happen. So what we've got to be really, really good at doing is turning failure into fuel. And the final one is exponential failure. Exponential failure is when we lead our team into failure, as we go and find bigger, faster, and more spectacular ways to fail. And the way I used to do this at Fast Way to Fitness was when we used to get lots of yeses on a program, it would be towards the end of the month, I'd say, hey team, what we're going to do, we're just going to offer the bigger packages at the end of this month now, because we've already got lots of success. How can we fail? How can we get more no's? How can we go and collect more no's? And doing this created exponential shifts. Like some of the people in the team got sales they never would have even dreamt of getting if they wouldn't have put that as their first offer when they spoke to potential clients and customers. So what we've got to do is we've got to turn this fear of failure into actual fuel for success. We've got to reframe it, and that's how we'll get over the fear of failure. The next fear is the fear of visibility or authenticity. And the way this might show up for you is that I fear what will happen to my relationships if I am my real self. What will happen in my company if I show up like I really want to show up? And I've spoken to loads of clients who've got this conundrum, is that when I show up like this, like a previous self or a version of my business partner or a version of what the clients want me to want to see, that they get success, they get rewarded for that. They get love and acceptance and belonging and success and money. And what happens is over time is this fear of authenticity of, I just really want to be myself, run a business like I want to run it and show up like I want to show up, is that albeit they might be rewarded with success, connection, money, and all that sort of stuff, is that it burns people out. It burns people so much because it's tiring trying to keep up this facade, this show of somebody that you are trying to be versus who you really are. And I tell the story of how I felt in leadership for a long time, is that I was the happy-go-lucky guy, which I am at my core, but I never shared my struggles around my emotions, my frustrations, and anger that I was experiencing as a leader. And although I was this happy-go-lucky guy with a smile on my face, dancing around, motivating people, on the inside, I was hurting. There was so much pain. There was so much frustration. And it's not that I wanted to go around shouting at everyone. It's that I wasn't being my true self. I wasn't showing both sides of the coin. And, and what I ended up doing is that this is why I'm more of a coach than a trainer now, is that I got an opportunity to be radically transparent with who I am, how I show up. And I don't wear a mask anymore. I really just show up as I am. And if clients, potential clients, customers, friends don't like that version of me, that's a true sign that's the path that we're not on that path together anymore. And it's a hard place to get to because sometimes there's so much at stake. If you want to behave in a certain way and it's contrary to what's getting you success, it's a big risk. It's a big risk. So this is a genuine fear for a lot of leaders. It's like, I've been like this for such a long time. I've been a people pleaser for such a long time. If I start having boundaries and saying no to people, what's going to happen? And that's probably, a big part of what I do in coaching, is help people go out and test these experiences. They go and test what it's like to say no to people. They go and test what it's like to lead in the way that they want to lead. And then they've got that space to come back and analyze the difference. So what actually a lot of people use to hide the fear of authenticity or visibility is timidity, dimming, and masks. So timid, they just show it as like a shell of themselves. Like you get a 10% version of yourself showing up as the leader instead of the full 100% all-in person. And trust me, when you take the 90% contractive behavior that you're holding back with and put it into being fully yourself, and you're 100% yourself, your results exponentially improve as well. And I've seen this time and time again when I've worked with different, especially I've been working with who's a good example of this is actually I was working with a CMO, a a firm, and this person was a shell of themselves because of the culture of the company. They believed that if they showed up in a certain way, that they wouldn't be like, she just said, this is not how things are done here. This is not how things are done here. And I challenged that. I said, well, hang on a second. Could you be the change in the culture? Anyway, lo and behold, she put in so many practices which weren't a culture fit in the company and radically transformed her team, her whole marketing department, and then the company as well. So these things, like, you can be the ripple of change no matter where you are featured in a company, in an organization, whether you've got a career or a business. You could be an employee listening to this, and you can lead and create a ripple of change in your organization. Equally, you can be the managing partner of a company, and you can create change in your company and your clients. Like, one of the things I always had at Fast is that I knew that I had the driving seat in the ripple effect. If I created change in myself, I would change one person who could go back and change their family, who could go back and change all sorts. And then that's what the biggest reward for me was. So what we want to be able to do is we want to stop the timidity. We want to remove the dimming behaviors that you have and take off that mask. And this comes from work. It comes from deep work. And it's knowing that, how do I really want to show up as a leader? And then starting to behave like that and getting feedback, getting like little micro bits of feedback about what happens when you show up as your full self. So next fear is the fear of responsibility. And here, this can often come from a position of, oh, I'm already got a lot of responsibility with everything I've got on my plate. I don't want more. And here's, I think, what happens is it's a misunderstanding. If you're fearing responsibility, or you're fearing more pressure, like maybe that's the way that you might put it, you fear more pressure, it's because you're thinking like a 2x person, not a 10x person. Now, when, like, for example, when I started one-to-one personal training, I could only in my head think about 10 to 30 clients. I didn't have the systems, the processes, the scaling to be able to serve clients for up to 300 members in the gym. I didn't have that thinking. And the thought of that many people joining at once just totally overwhelmed me. I was like, oh my gosh, I could never deal with that. But over time, and with a lot more thought and up-leveling the way that I thought about interactions with clients, how to best serve people, is that I developed better thinking tools and better strategic tools to deal with that many clients. So if you've got a fear of more responsibility, it's a sign that you're thinking about your business with a 2x versus a 10x mindset. As we start to use a 10x mindset, it removes the thinking where we have to do more, and it replaces it with thinking that we need to be better and more effective. And so this is another one that needs higher level mind management. We need to learn the skills of one-to-many. We need to learn the skills of higher level mind management. So as we have more responsibility, we actually are fueled to do better work. So it's a real shift for so many people when they do this. The way that people deal with the fear of responsibility is abdication. And what this means is, abdication is where you're like, oh, it's not my wheelhouse. I don't need to deal with that. Or I'm not very good at this. And abdication often comes from a place of, well, I'm not very good at this, so I'm not going to do it at all. And this was one of my big traits early on in my career, is because I didn't understand, for example, finances as well as I believed I could or should. I just used to give it off to either my business partner, Mark, or I'll give it off to my CFO, Joe. And I just needed to know that they had it all covered. And to a degree, you need to be able to delegate, but you need to also be empowered with the numbers and the data. You need to know as much as possible. And that was a big, big shift for me as a leader. Not abdicating, but delegating. And I think what happened for me personally is that I got so au fait with the numbers that when I checked in on them, I could read a balance sheet, I could read a profit and loss statement, I could read a cash flow forecast, I knew where we were in the business, I had enough information to make informed decisions about the business. And so I felt way more responsible and empowered. And I think that what happens is so many business owners, leaders especially, because they abdicate so many parts of the business, they feel disempowered. That's why they fear more responsibility. So there's so many levels to this. Next one is the fear of being able to cope. And my experience of this is working with leaders who have perhaps maybe had some mental health issues. They've had some struggles, some challenges. They may have had a nervous breakdown. They might have lost a family member amongst all that. And it's almost like that scene in Bruce Almighty where he goes, "Is this all you've got for me? You know, what else can you throw at me, God?" And he's like standing on the side of the road, and there's lightning and storms and everything, and it's almost like the things can't get any worse, and then they do. And you've had that experience in your life before. And I think I had that experience going through my 29 to 30s. My business wasn't doing well at all. It was like I'd taken on an overhead which was way too big. I'd got the model wrong. So my staffing model was wrong. I had self-employed staff members, and although I had a big team, I was giving them way too much money. That was like a big struggle for me. And the business was starting to track down in terms of its profitability. So I was like bearing the brunt of the costs. And the business wasn't going well. I had a really successful coaching business at the time, highly profitable, which was kind of hiding how unprofitable the gym was. And I really started to struggle personally. And then my partner, my wife at the time, said that she wasn't happy. And then also I got like a £40,000 VAT bill, which I hadn't accounted for. And then I think also, just some other stuff was going on. Oh, my mum wasn't well as well. There we go. My mum actually was on like near-death experience from my mum. So all those things kind of just happened at once. I remember just sitting on the side of my bed. Actually, the more prevalent I stood in the shower and my head against the glass, and I was just thinking to myself, I can't deal with all of this. At some point, I'm going to break. And actually, one of the things that did for me is that I did cope. Piece by piece, I put all of those things right. I got all those things, so much better than they needed to be, and I fixed so much of that. And that the thing I think that happens is that I'd done so much coaching work anyway up until that point. And I think this is what a lot of leaders anyway, fear, is not being able to be in control. And there's a nice statement that Brené Brown says is that you never really had control. All you had was anxiety. And you don't want to, the actual statement is you fear submission, or you fear to let go, because you don't want to let go of control. But you never really had control. All you had was anxiety. And what that really hit me, because so many people think that they've got control, but all they have is perceived control. And what they actually really worry about is like, what happens when it all gets too much? What am I going to do? How am I going to show up? What am I going to do that's going to be dumb? And in my earlier parts of my life, I'd seen like when things had gone really badly, I did some dumb stuff. And the same happened in my 30s. I did some really dumb things that really tarnished my relationships, tarnished my reputation, that I'm not proud of now. However, I got through all of that stuff. And would I deal with that same stuff in the same way now? No way. But at the same time, I did cope. And there was an exercise I did with Dr. Robert Glover. So Dr. Robert Glover is one of the most, well-known men's coaches in the world. And we just like talked about all of these possible scenarios that could happen in our life. And then he just asked this really simple question. And could you cope with that? And that was a really profound shift for me. It's like, well, yeah, if this didn't go well, and this didn't go well, and this didn't make as much money, and this broke down, could I cope? And I was like, yes, I absolutely could. And sometimes it's just getting really clear that if everything was to, and this is a mindset I started to develop, is like, burn everything down, could I start again? Take everything away from me, could I start again? And that gave me so much agency when I started to really look at that mindset. Another tool that you can use is actually do more things where you are out of control. And this is when I do Dubai deep dive with people. I take them on an experience where they are not in control. They will feel very out of control. And that is what they often say to me afterwards. I couldn't control my heart rate. I couldn't control this. I couldn't control that. And it was just actually learning to control their body, which is enormous for helping them regain or reclaim control in the moment. And it's a really powerful experience because so many people don't do things that scare them or that put them in fear or not. And like the difference between fear and danger, there's a difference between being fearful of something and being in real danger. And most people are never in real danger, they're just fearful. And that's why a tool for this, if a fear of yours is not being able to cope, is do more things where you have to learn to cope in the moment. Like, start with micro things and build it up. Shameless plug for the Dubai deep dive. This is probably the biggest impact that you'll have from come and do that with me. And that's what I've done with so many clients. I've just put them into a situation where they think they've got control, they've got no control. And when they work that out, it's like, how do they work through it? Also in a very safe environment as well. And the final one, and I think this is the one that I think a lot of people fear, is the fear of real accountability. Now, I got this from the body transformation world. People fear the real data. They fear what the truth really is. And this came from, especially like especially food tracking your food and being honest about what you've eaten. People fear the accountability of that, because if I'm really going to put the bottle of wine down, the cheese board, the bread, and all that stuff afterwards, what are you going to think of me? Same in sales, is that people they fear the accountability because it shows how little they've done, or how much they've done, how little the results that they've had. It shows, like, real accountability shows where the issue is, and people fear that, especially leaders. They don't want to be in the wrong. If I'm to disclose all of my activity and it isn't the activity my coach, my boss, my manager, my leader, whoever is wanting or expecting, I fear for my job, I fear for my reputation, I fear for so many things. So the fear of accountability is fear of the data itself, fear of the facts. Like, if I actually put down the facts, like, I've only done 10 calls today and I meant to have done 40, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me the way I show up in my team? Fear of having to keep my word. Now, this is something that I think I really did fear. Is like, well, the best way not to have to keep promises is not to make them. Well, the problem is that we're making a promise every single day when we show up to our work and we've got stuff to do. And when we've got like accountability measures in place, what we often fear is what's going to happen if I don't keep my word. And people continuously see that I don't keep my word. There's a genuine fear for so many people on that. And the only way I actually know to overcome this fear is to just be radically accountable and experience what it's like to create your own accountability. Now, the reason I'm saying create my own accountability is because I believe that accountability is self-created. Someone might give you a structure as to be accountable by, but you're the one who's going to have to create it. Most people, when they come into coaching, think that the coach is going to hold them accountable. Now, here's a bugbear with me, with what I have when people say I need to be held accountable, is that you are often abdicating responsibility by saying, hold me accountable. Because that might work in the short term, but it never works in the long term. All you end up with is being a needy client, or having needy clients, or having the reliant staff members who can't be autonomous without you there. So the only way to overcome the fear of accountability, the data, so seeing what you're really doing, is to be that, is to do that. And then you will see and experience how magical it is when you've got real data to work from as you are being led or leading your team. So they're the 6 fears that I believe that so many leaders have. And if you're a leader in your life and you're a leader in your work, your team, your family, your organization, I guarantee that you've come across one of those 6 fears before. Now, what I wanted to share with you, I started at the start, is that I'm launching something called the Mile Deep Mastermind. And if you are struggling with any of those fears, I believe it's self-discipline, self-leadership, self-development, and self-love which help you overcome those fears. Not so much that they go away, is that you can handle them way, way easier, faster, and more effectively. And if you're a leader and you're interested in overcoming some of those fears, listen to the podcast again, take some notes, go and implement what I've shared. There's some valuable stuff in there. But if you want to have a conversation about how you can work on those 4 areas, self-leadership, self-discipline, self-love, and self-development, to overcome those fears and achieve your highest potential this year, all you need to do is go on over to www.coachbenjaminowen.com/mile deep application. And there's an application form there where you can apply to be on the mastermind with people just like you who are looking to lead at their highest levels. Go and check it out. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast and maybe you resonated with one of the 6 fears. If you have, I'd love that you would comment or share if you've watched this on YouTube. If you've listened to it on Spotify, I'd love for you to follow and review the show. And I'm very much looking forward to bringing you the next episode. Take care. Thanks so much for listening or watching.